horror movies. In snapper cases. Welcome back. Yeah, snapper cases. Don't you just love them? No. I don't know anybody who loves them. I'll tell you one of the reasons I hate snapper cases is you put them on the shelf, shunk, but then you take one out because you want to look at it, but then you go to put it back and it's like, oh damn it, and then it's all like, you're like trying to fix it, and it's like DVDs are crashing all over your shelf, and oh, it's just a mess. I hate it. Anyway, there's a few that aren't available any other way, so we just kind of have to put up with it if we want to enjoy the movies. And that's really what it's all about, isn't it? The movies. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, two that I got in snapper cases, one of which is The House of Wax, which you may recall I talked about last year. But one of the things I mentioned last year was I did not watch the other movie that's on this set. Now, of course, the feature movie on this is the 1953 version starring Vincent Price. But, as a bonus, on this edition, you also get the original 1933 version entitled Mystery of the Wax Museum. Yes, a lot of people don't know that The House of Wax was actually a remake. Well, everybody knows that the recent one was a remake, but we're not going to talk about that, and I am in no rush to see it, and don't care if I ever do. The 1953 House of Wax was a big part of my childhood. It was the very first 3D movie I ever saw. And I have to tell you, in the 80s, when you got a 3D movie, it was done with these kinds of glasses. Not these kinds of glasses. Yeah, everybody thinks Real D is new technology, but it really isn't. The whole concept of polarized 3D has been around for a very, very long time, which is why I was really puzzled when 3D movies made a mild comeback about 10 years ago, and they had gone back to using these. It's like, what the hell? Why are you going back to red and blue? Or cyan and magenta, whatever you want to call it. Because the colored glasses never work as well. I'll tell you where the colored glasses work really well is things like comic books and 3D still images. But for moving images, it's like your brain just can't process all the color information and the left and right information and everything fast enough to actually make the effect work most of the time. But with polarized is beautiful. Glasses off, 2D fuzzy. Glasses on, whoa, I'm on Pandora. Glasses off, 2D fuzzy again. It's that simple and that effective. Unless you can only see out of one eye, in which case it's blurry 2D, in focus 2D. I kind of feel sorry for people like that because that means they're paying an extra $3.50 just to put the movie in focus. That's gotta suck. Anyway, when I was a kid, I don't know, about 8 or 9 years old, I don't remember exactly because I was a kid, I had the good fortune to see House of Wax in a theater in 3D. And it was polarized 3D. And it worked beautifully. Oh my god, the paddle ball guy? Yeah, that paddle ball was hitting me on the nose every time. It was amazing. Great stuff. So anyway, being a long-time fan of the 1953 version, I'd always been really curious about this 1933 version that I kept hearing about. And of course, I've had this DVD for ages, as you know, but for whatever reason, I just never got around to watching it. So I was kind of in the mood for some old-school horror, so I popped it in and thought, hey, I haven't seen the 33 version. Let's check it out. Now the cool thing about the 1933 version is it actually uses an early Technicolor process. So it's actually in color. A 1933 movie in color. Now it's what they call a 2-strip color process. Later Technicolor films used a 3-strip process. Now what the whole idea is you combine the different color strips, and each color strip represents a different color. And from those 3 basic colors, you get all the colors in the palette. So in the case of the 2-strip color process, you had red and green, which meant reds and greens in the image were really vibrant, but everything else looked kind of muted, because it was missing that all-important 3rd strip, which wasn't developed until later. Now the 3-strip process was a little bit different. It used, if I remember correctly, yellow, blue, and red. And from yellow, blue, and red, it was able to make all those colors. So of course, having yellow and blue, you could make green with yellow and blue. And then with blue and red, you could make purple. And then with red and yellow, you can make orange and things like that. So with that 3-strip process, you were able to get the full, vibrant, blazing Technicolor that we all know from movies in the 50s and 60s. One of the earliest uses, of course, that most of us would be familiar with would be Gone with the Wind and, of course, The Wizard of Oz, two of the earliest proper uses of Technicolor. And funny enough, only a mere 5 years after Mystery of the Wax Museum. Now apparently Warner Brothers had done a few films using this 2-strip Technicolor process, and apparently they didn't really want to use it for any so-called serious films, but for a relatively low-budget horror film, why not? And the only reason they did Mystery of the Wax Museum using this process was because they were under contract to Technicolor to use this process for, I believe, 3 films. So Mystery of the Wax Museum was only made using this process to fulfill that contractual obligation. And now, some 70 plus years later, it's actually kind of cool that they did that, because it's a rare look at color in a 1930s film. It's not colorized. It was shot that way. It was done that way originally. So it's pretty cool to see. And honestly, watching it with that type of color process, after a while you just kind of get accustomed to it, and you just kind of pass it off as, oh, well, it's a slightly faded film print, when really it isn't. That's what it actually looks like in all its glory. So as for the movie itself, I really enjoyed it, and I say that as someone who's a fan of the 1953 version since I was old enough to go to movies. Now, it is a slightly different version of the story, but all the basic elements are still there. Highly talented sculptor is running his own wax museum, his business partner tortures it to cash in on the insurance money, revenge plot ensues, as well as the sculptor going stark raving mad and kidnapping people and killing them and pouring wax all over them to recreate his wax museum. Now, one of the really big differences that you'll notice at the 1933 version is there's a few different characters in it from the 1953 version. Most notably, you have Glenda Farrell as a plucky Lois Lane-style reporter who's basically trying to figure out what's going on, and definitely has a nose for news, and a tendency to get herself into trouble when she pokes her nose into the wrong corners, shall we say. But she is just a wonderful character. I mean, she is just such a hoot to watch. And I think it was Glenda Farrell as this reporter character that really stole the show from the leads. And who were the leads? Well, you had Fay Wray as the damsel in distress. Same year she went on to even greater fame in King Kong. And Lionel Atwill, who you'll probably recall I've mentioned before as being in quite a number of the Universal Monster movies, as the deranged and disfigured sculptor. So overall, great stuff. If you enjoyed the 1953 version like I do, then I highly recommend the 1933 version. It's a great, great version of essentially the same story, but with enough twists to make it sufficiently different that I think it'll be quite fresh to you, no matter how intimately familiar you may be with the 1953 version. So that's Mystery of the Wax Museum, the original film upon which House of Wax and House of Wax were based. So let's take a quick look at the covers here. Actually did scans this time. So there's the front cover, quite nice. Which I think is actually a section from one of the original movie posters for the 1953 version. But then if we look at the back cover, you'll notice the color in the photograph on the back cover is very muted. Now, the 1953 version was done in full-blown 3-strip Technicolor and 3D. The DVD, by the way, is not 3D, unfortunately. I'm hoping with the new Blu-ray 3D craze, we might actually get a proper 3D version that is comparable in effect to the theatrical version. But you notice the color in this picture. Now, this has essentially been processed for the back cover. I don't know why. But the interesting thing is, and perhaps this is why they did this, the way that it's been processed in this image here is very similar to how the 2-strip Technicolor process looks in the 1933 version. So that'll give you some idea of how it has a very muted palette. I mean, when you're only working from red and green, there's really not much you can do. So that was the one I wanted to talk about the most.